So it's Wednesday the 29th of July, it's about 11:30. I'm sitting here at the Luca coffee shop in my home village of Westerham, after all these conversations we've had with people around the country. And I'm sitting here with neighbours that I didn't know I had until yesterday. And they are a wonderful couple, Lawrence Bestow and Alice and Nicola Leprovo. Sorry, I don't say Alison. I don't know why I keep calling you Alison. Nicola Leprovo. How do you pronounce it?
Leprovo.
What? Say it again.
Leprovo.
Leprovo. And I had to make sure I didn't say Bestow as opposed to Bestow for Lawrence. It's Lawrence Bestow. And it's a lovely morning, and I'm just about to hand over to... Who shall I start with? Lawrence?
Start with Nicola.
Start with Nicola. Ladies first. And I've asked them already the basic kind of question about how did you cope with the lockdown? What advice would you give to people? Actually, I'll ask Nicola to introduce herself and then just start speaking about life under lockdown and where we go forward, especially in terms of mental health issues that may have been generated by the lockdown. And then at any point, Lawrence, if he wishes to, can join us, add whatever he wants by way of his own opinion, interpretation, commentary. So over to you, Nicola.
Thank you. So I'm Nicola. I'm a recently retired nurse, having spent many years working in end-of-life care through hospices and in the NHS.
I'm going to hold it, because with all this noise going, you have to go as close to the microphone as possible. Go ahead.
So I'm very much about, when I've been at work, focusing on people, how illness affects them, and relationships that are affected by illness, and supporting both patients and families. So coming into a situation with COVID, where I was somebody who had to be shielding, was quite a different scenario to anything I'd come across before, really, as for so many people. For me, it was quite frustrating, that initial time leading up to shutdown, because I was thinking if I was still at work, I would still be involved in this. But I can't be involved in this because I've retired, B, because I'm shielding because of health issues I'd had last year. And how frustrating that was compared to sort of people that I knew who were really working hard, and knowing what people would be going through at work very much, and not being able to be part of it. So, and also a lot of my friends being quite affected by having to work through it in various ways and change how they were delivering care and support or working in services. So one of the things that's really kept us going and trying to keep a balance in life has been that re-engagement with the outside world as nature, really. Having lots of long walks, taking a spade and fork to a good part of the garden and changing the landscape at home and becoming productive.
May I ask, what's your favourite walk around here?
We like walking round the back fields, really.
Up over that way, really. Anywhere. I wouldn't say.
Describe it for people who don't know where that way is.
Yeah, okay.
Behind the town.
Okay, Westerham is a small town set on an unfortunately busy A road, but it's very easy to get out of. It's surrounded by fields. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. You can walk for miles and miles. and you're surprised always at suddenly how high you are, and you get a vista across Kent in one direction or another. And we are fortunate with a lot of footpaths and open spaces. Squares, yes. There's lots of woodland. There's lots of open fields on the Squares estate, and very fortunately we can wander more or less at will, which we do. If I'll just while I'm talking, if I just say one of the things that's surprised me most about the lockdown, and it hasn't affected me personally a great deal because I'm retired, so there's no question of having to do that horrible commute into London or anything like that. One of the things that surprised me most is how other people have reacted to it. There's the whole spectrum. One of our friends has been, who is vulnerable and shielding herself, has been very badly mentally affected by the whole thing, and I'm not sure that.
Without mentioning names, would you mind telling us what the mental condition was?
Yeah, I think she's getting panic attacks. The thought, I think, of going outside now is daunting to the point where sometimes she can't bring herself to do it. Other times she can do it, and when she manages to get outside, do a simple thing like going into Marks and Sparks, and managing to do that without a panic attack is quite a great achievement for her. Whether this is temporary or not remains to be seen, but that's a personal experience of someone who's been very badly affected.
Do you know what she's doing to overcome this?
What's she doing to overcome it? I think really she's relying on her friends.
Headspace app.
Yeah.
She uses the Headspace app to try and do relaxation and calmness app on her phone. And we've been having...
What is that? Can you describe that a bit?
It does mindfulness and CBT type exercises, cognitive behavioural therapy, to help calm anxieties and relax and help her to sleep. We, as a group of friends, have been having twice weekly Zoom chats for about half an hour or an hour together, and just lots of texting and keeping in touch and sending photos to each other. So that's been one way of managing for us.
Tell us a bit about mindfulness before we go further. Do you know much about it?
I can't explain it.
About what? Mindfulness.
Mindfulness is about trying to keep your mind in the moment and not let it get overactive and look at other situations. It's about trying to just keep focused on your breathing, trying to keep focused on the immediacy of life and to re-engage with just being calm and quiet.
Beautiful thought. That's a lovely practice. I've heard that they use Buddhist techniques for that.
Yes, I use a lot of techniques. But a lot of it's breathing, relaxation. It's just trying to stop your mind jumping around everywhere else. Get a little bit of focus on something that's just present in your life at that moment, and not just start letting your brain race away with other issues or thoughts. It's about channeling your thoughts more.
Yeah, I think the Buddhists call it the monkey mind that's jumping around like a monkey in the trees. Just stop the monkey jumping.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sort of like that.
Good. So now where do you think... Well, go ahead, Lawrence.
No, go on.
Well, I was going to ask, how do you think we can turn this crisis to spiritual account?
One of the other things I've been involved in through lockdown, and it's been more of that more recently than earlier, is that I did apply to be an NHS responder to do the check-in and chat telephone calls with the national programme. And a couple of the recent talks I've done, people have had very severe anxieties, not really related to lockdown directly, but just surfacing emotional baggage that has been kept suppressed, or they've had previous treatment for, some of it in mental health services, and how open people are to strangers, just having the time to talk.
Yeah.
And finding it just helpful to have a listening ear and some compassion. It's not actually offering anything that you would term as a therapeutic intervention. It's just about actually just being able to listen and acknowledge that they've had these feelings at that time.
Yeah, someone told me that empathy manifested to a person who's suffering from anxiety is often the most effective way of getting into the subconscious levels where the anxieties come from. Just empathy, a friendly face, a smile, a look in the eyes.
So it's really hard to do that on the telephone. So it really has to be about voice. And showing interest that you are actually genuinely listening.
Yeah.
So it's using listening and reflection, because you can't use the visual cues.
Right. Have you had to do that by telephone? Right.
So part of the responder role with the check-in and chat is that you are just telephoning somebody you've never met,
Right.
or know nothing about, to try and help them feel a bit better.
Right. That's a wonderful service that you perform. How many of those have you done?
About a handful.
Well done. Lawrence, would you like to?
Listening to Nicola talking to these people as part of her volunteer service, from what I can gather, just from snippets of the conversation, the people are not really talking about the COVID situation at all. They seem to be talking about all and sundry. Now, whether these are naturally anxious people or not, or whether they would just like to talk to a stranger, is very difficult to tell. But my experience, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicola, is that they're not actually ringing directly, overtly, because of COVID.
No. I would say out of the calls I've done, well, certainly one call I did, really the issues were not COVID related. I think that person had been referred to the service because the referrer didn't know what else to do and wanted something that was quickly available.
Now, you were saying earlier, Nicola, that you thought that one thing that we should all be doing more is to go back to elements of our traditions that we have forgotten about or lost touch with. Would you like to talk a bit more about that?
Well, I think I have thought long and hard about this through the current lockdown much more, but it's always been something niggling in my mind, and when I've been at work looking to be more holistic and trying to think about what naturally occurs that is helpful to us. So I've always had an interest in massage, aromatherapy, reflexology.
Excellent.
The use of complementary methods to help people be less anxious.
Acupuncture?
Acupuncture. I've used acupuncture.
What, you can do that? You do?
No, I've had acupuncture.
Oh, you've had that.
I used to do reflexology myself.
That's just on the feet, isn't
Yeah.
it? Just give us a brief description of what that means.
You've got to like feet. You can't be scared of feet. A lot of people don't like feet.
Right.
A lot of people don't like having their feet touched. So you've got to have somebody who's receptive to having their foot touched, and you've got to be unafraid of touching feet.
Right.
So it's a massage of the foot that involves using the pressure points in a certain way, and you can pick up tensions in the feet,
Really?
in the soles of the feet, that can give you an indication of where somebody might be feeling emotionally or physically unwell, and you work on that area of the foot.
Is that related to the organs?
Yeah, it's a bit like follows the sort of Chinese medicine acupuncture meridians.
Right.
It's all mirrored in the feet.
Right. Wonderful. Lawrence, you were talking to me about the importance of the perennial philosophy of Aldous Huxley. And do you think there's any relevance in that philosophy for our present predicament?
Yes, I think it's not only perennial, but it's universal, and it sounds a bit pompous, but I think it's relevant in all situations, in all times, and it's really about putting people back in touch with their true nature, not the veneer of the superficial civilization which we're unfortunate enough to live in at the moment, but the real heights or depths of what we are capable of mentally. So it's always relevant. The difficulty is shutting off from the noise that's around us and getting back to what's really important.
Exactly.
It reminds me that one of my great guitar heroes, Jimi Hendrix, used to, in one song, referred to the world as it is as the noise, and to a large extent that is right. And you can't concentrate on things with the noise, and you can probably hear the background noise here. However, with various techniques under the umbrella of mindfulness, you can, in theory at least, maintain that mindfulness in any situation. That's easier said than done. I think it's easier to be mindful in the forest on your own or with a quiet companion than it is sitting here on Western High Street. But
Right.
but the other thing I'd like to say about the lockdown is that a lot of people have politicised it. The government's this, the government's that. Or they've now we've got a polarisation between people who will happily wear masks and people who won't, and they seem to be at one another's throats, which is sad. And it's not something like the Blitz where people are said to have pulled together. It's had a polarising effect.
That's interesting. Yeah.
No one trusts the governments anymore. People don't trust the NHS, or in the States they don't trust well, they don't trust the president, no, but they don't trust the medical authorities in the States, the FDA.
What's the FDA?
The Food and Drug Administration. The conspiracy theories are, well, I was going to say bonkers, but in fact, they're very popular, and it seems to be that they're growing. So where we'll go after this...
Would you like to tell... I mean, I've heard some of the conspiracy. Would you like to just tell me one of the most plausible conspiracy theories you've come across?
I think the most plausible, funnily enough, is the 5G theory, because they're...
Can you tell us what that is?
Right, well, we're having an upgrade on the infrastructure of the telephone networks worldwide. From started off as, I don't know whether it was ever 1G, but it started off as 2G, 3G, 4G, and now we're upgrading to 5G. Exactly what it means, I don't know, but it's it seems to be a different frequency of radio signal that's being put in place. There seem to be some plausible, real studies which say that these things do affect the outer layers of people's skin, which I can understand. An electric field or a field of any sort is going to have some effects on human flesh and bone, because we're objects in the field like anything else. But then to make the step which people do in the conspiracy theory, that therefore this thing is then spreading the virus, seems to me to be a step or two too far.
I mean, part of a government policy to have released the virus and then to have got this 5G to ensure that it keeps spreading?
I think that's one aspect of the theory. I think another aspect of the theory is that the 5G is actually the virus itself. I mean,
Really?
once you start imagining these things, there's no limit, is there? And people have been attacking these masts, but it's partially understandable because we're faced with an invisible, possibly deadly threat about which initially we knew next to nothing. And it's not surprising that people will react in an irrational way. I know personally, when I'm faced with a real threat, and frankly, I don't see the virus as a real threat to me. Maybe I'm just lucky in living in an environment where I'm not particularly at risk. But when I feel at risk, I revert to kind of magical, perhaps pre-civilized thinking. It's the sort of thing where, if this doesn't happen, then I'm going to be all right. And there's no logic to it whatsoever. I don't know whether I've strayed off the subject there.
No, very interesting. I mean, would you like to talk a little bit about your own practice of mindfulness? Do you have a meditative technique? You said that it's easier to be mindful on your own in the forest.
Yes.
And what do? You just still your mind?
Well, I think now, when I started meditating in my 20s, about 40 years ago, I was following the one of the Evans Wentz books. Yeah.
Just repeat that.
Yes, I was following one of the Evans Wentz translations of a Tibetan text called Tibetan Yoga and Secret Practices, which was interesting because one of the first techniques is you sit quietly on your own and notice your thoughts without trying to react to them. And then the second stage, weeks, months, who knows, years later, would be to realize that you can't actually stop your thoughts. And in some paradoxical way, that quite frequently slows your thoughts down, almost to the point where they do in fact stop. But what I try to do now, and it's not possible all the time, otherwise I'd be a saint, is to be here now, but in ordinary circumstances, like sitting here now. And in fact, in some parts of Tibetan Zen Buddhism, the theory is that actually you don't need to do anything at all because we are already enlightened. It's a pretty high philosophy, and I don't think in reality one could actually live and function and survive very long in the modern world living that way, because you wouldn't go to work, for example. But that's a circle that needs to be squared.
Nicola, would you like to add anything to that in terms of your experience of mindfulness and of people that you've spoken to and counselled?
I think it's about somebody finding what works for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a set core of beliefs. I think it's very powerful when you have your own beliefs and understanding of where those beliefs come from. And for some people, they need that intellectual understanding as well as the ability to practice. For other people, they just need a method that can be given to them and explained that it will be helpful for you by marshalling your thoughts and don't necessarily need a strong existential philosophical basis for. So it's about gauging where people are, being able to interact with that is important. I've looked after people who have very deeply religious beliefs and can't square their religious beliefs with what's happening to them. And it's about how do you find that way in to open up the conversation, but not necessarily actually square the circle for them, because it's not possible. But it's about actually having the avenue to say, well, we can understand that, and we know how that maybe how somebody else could help discuss that. But actually, if we actually get you doing this deep breathing exercise or this reflective thinking, you might just help you feel a little bit better and more able to marshal your thoughts to talk to somebody.
I noticed that you have a crucifix around your neck. That is immediately a kind of consoling symbol. Is that something that had just happened, or is it something that you hope will happen? That you like people to know that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ?
Not really that. It's actually a commitment, wasn't it? A sign of commitment that Lawrence bought me.
Yeah, I bought it in Cyprus. I bought it in Cyprus. I don't think that either of us are particularly, we would say that we're Christian, but we happen to have been brought up in a Christian culture. And to us, it could quite easily just have been a heart or a rose or anything else, I think. I don't know whether Nicola would agree with that.
Yes, and I think I spent some years working in a Christian organisation, not because I was particularly religious or because I wanted to work in a Christian organisation per se. It was more an organisation where I believed what they were doing was right and where I fitted in terms of my skill set.
So you agreed very much with what the Christian organisation was doing, even if you didn't necessarily uphold all of the beliefs that...
Absolutely. It was also a great eye-opener, really, in some of the way that people react, even though they profess to be acute. I really think that one of the things that this situation over the past few months has shown is that we need to have common kindness for each other still, and take much more time to reflect on the benefits of the things that are around us naturally, rather than keep looking for solutions being presented to us and artificial solutions. There's so much we can do to help ourselves and access and start to think about what the natural world and the old ways tell us.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think that there's a distrust leading on from that of the vaccination program, which people seem to think is coming, potentially a compulsory vaccination program, or possibly a regime where people can only travel if they have a vaccination certificate. I don't know how any government's going to cope with that. There's a lot of opposition to it already. But yes, getting back to what is important, trying to accept that we are prone to illnesses and diseases, and that we can't control things, and that perhaps there are forces which we will never control, and we have to perhaps humble ourselves and realise that humanity is perhaps not all that in charge of its own destiny, certainly not at the moment in physical terms, but nevertheless, if you're totally in the moment, all those things tend to evaporate. If you can get there.
Great. Thank you very much, Lawrence. That's wonderful. Thank you both very, very much for your time.
I think there's also something to be said.
Do you want to carry on?
No, not really. I was going to say it's a bit about
go ahead.
Our expectations of what can be provided for us has to change. We're not going to have eternal life forevermore, and we need to adjust the way we are to make the best of what we have, rather than keep looking to improve and have more.
Thank you very much.